Ever read a book that just completely changes how you see the world?
Oh,
Like
totally.
shakes you up a bit?
Yeah.
That's The Invisible Landscape by Terence and Dennis McKenna for me.
It's a mind bender for sure.
It's jam-packed with wild ideas about consciousness, shamanism, even physics.
Really ambitious stuff.
So today, we're diving deep into some of the most fascinating bits.
The McKennas really don't shy away from big, complex concepts. It's a wild ride.
No easy answers, that's for sure.
Huh.
But hopefully we can all walk away thinking a little differently.
I'm game.
One of the things that really struck me was how they connect shamanism, which often gets labeled as, mystical or primitive, with something like schizophrenia, which we see through a very different lens, right? A clinical lens.
Yeah, absolutely. They were fascinated by how different cultures interpret altered states of consciousness.
That's such a good point.
Like in many indigenous cultures, the shaman, someone who intentionally enters these states to connect with the spiritual world, they're revered. They're a healer, a guide. But then in Western society, similar experiences, like you see in schizophrenia, often it's labeled as mental illness, something to be feared.
It really makes you wonder how much cultural context shapes our understanding of the mind.
Huge influence.
Like if you were born in the Amazon, would you experience visions differently?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question.
So much to unpack there.
Yeah.
But what were the McKennas actually trying to do with their research? Were they just making observations or did they have a goal?
Oh, they definitely weren't content with just observing. They wanted to experience these altered states for themselves.
Wow.
In a controlled way.
Bold move.
Yeah. They designed an experiment using harmine,
Okay.
which is a compound found in ayahuasca, that shamanic brew.
Right.
And they combined that with techniques to influence their brainwave states.
So they were basically trying to induce a shamanic-like experience, but within, like, a scientific setting.
Exactly.
Wow. Talk about brave.
Yeah.
But honestly, it was this whole idea of the holographic brain that really captivated me. It just sounds so sci-fi. How does that even work?
Well, imagine a hologram, like those 3D images you see on some credit cards.
Yeah, I get you.
They're created from the interference patterns of light waves.
Okay.
Now, here's the fascinating bit. If you break a hologram into pieces, each piece can still reconstruct the entire image.
Oh, wow.
It's not like a photograph where you just get a fragment of the whole.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, I can kind of visualize that. But how on earth does this relate to our brains?
So the McKennas, building on the work of Carl Prubram, this neuroscientist, they proposed that the brain might process information in a similar way.
Okay.
And they pointed to research showing that memories, they aren't stored in just one specific spot.
Not like a filing cabinet.
Exactly, not like files in a cabinet. Instead, memories seem to be distributed throughout the brain, much like how information in a hologram is spread across the entire surface.
So instead of having a memory file labeled First Kiss tucked away in some corner of our brain.
It's more like the experience is woven into the very fabric of our neural network.
Wow, that's wild.
It is.
Okay, so that's pretty mind-blowing in itself. But then the McKennas, they take it even further. They link this whole holographic brain model to quantum mechanics.
Right, and that's where things get really interesting.
Oh, absolutely. We're venturing into territory that even physicists struggle to explain.
Yeah.
But I'm hooked. Tell me more.
Okay, so quantum mechanics, just a quick recap, it explores how the subatomic world works, and those rules are super bizarre.
Very bizarre.
Like one of the key principles is that observation might actually influence reality at that level.
It's like just by looking at something, we're changing it.
Kind of, yeah. Like the act of observing a particle, it might actually change how that particle behaves.
So reality is subjective. Our consciousness shapes what we perceive.
That's one way to think about it.
Wow. Okay. There's a lot to process. So are the McKennas basically saying that we might be living in a kind of holographic universe?
Precisely.
And that our consciousness, instead of being separate from this reality, is totally intertwined with it?
Yeah, deeply connected.
Wow. This is definitely some next-level thinking. So we're saying our brains might be working like holograms, processing information in this crazy spread-out way. But what's the physical stuff happening? How do our thoughts, our memories, how do they actually come from the matter of our brains?
That's where they challenge us to look deeper, to the very foundation of life itself.
You're talking about DNA.
Exactly. DNA. They suggest we might be misinterpreting its role.
Okay, I'm listening.
Instead of just a blueprint for building proteins, they see DNA as this dynamic, information-rich molecule.
So it's more than just a static set of instructions.
Way more. They think it could be a key player in consciousness itself. like a massive library of knowledge encoded within every cell of our body.
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty radical idea. I mean, are we saying our thoughts and perceptions come from this DNA-based library?
It's a central part of their theory, yeah. And that's where neurotransmitters come in. They're not just messengers, they're more like orchestra conductors.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I need to hear more about these conductors.
They help orchestrate this whole symphony of activity in our brains. And the McKennas, they were particularly interested in serotonin.
Serotonin. Okay. I know that one. At least I've heard of it. That's the neurotransmitter that affects mood, right?
Yeah, mood, sleep, even how we perceive the world, all that good stuff. And the McKennas, they proposed that serotonin, especially how it interacts with our DNA, could actually be involved in creating thoughts.
Hold on. Are we saying that our thoughts are the result of tiny little molecules interacting with our DNA? That's wild.
That's the gist of it, yeah. It's like a feedback loop between our biology and our consciousness, they thought.
Okay, so we've got these molecules, these neurotransmitters like serotonin, potentially orchestrating our thoughts by interacting with DNA. But what's the physical mechanism? How does that translate into the experience of thinking?
Well, that's where they bring in electromagnetism. They suggested that the interaction between serotonin and DNA, it could actually create electromagnetic signals within the brain.
Okay, so our brains are like these intricate electrical circuits, and our thoughts are the electrical signals flashing through them.
That's a good way to picture it. But it's not random, it's organized. The McKennas propose that these signals are shaped by a process called electron spin resonance. ESR. It's like a conductor directing a symphony of electromagnetic waves, and each thought is a unique melody.
I love that analogy, the symphony of the brain. So are you saying that our subjective experience, all of it, thoughts, memories, feelings, it's all just a symphony of electromagnetic energy playing out in our brains?
That's the heart of their argument, yeah. And it gets even more mind-bending. They suggested these electromagnetic signals, which are shaped by our experiences and thoughts, that could actually influence the very structure of our DNA.
Okay, so now it's a two-way street. Our thoughts could actually be changing our genetic code. That's huge.
It's a powerful concept, makes you think about the potential of our minds in a whole new light.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered shamanism, holographic brains, the mysteries of DNA, even dipped our toes into quantum mechanics. It's a lot. And now we're going to add ancient Chinese wisdom to the mix.
Yeah, buckle up because we're jumping into the world of the I Ching.
It's quite a leap from the subatomic world to ancient texts. So remind me, what's the I Ching all about again?
The I Ching is based on a system of 64 hexagrams. Each one represents a different state or situation, like archetypes of change. It's about understanding the patterns of the universe.
And the McKennas were drawn to it. Why?
They were fascinated by the order of these hexagrams, specifically the King Wen sequence. They thought it was more than just random. They saw it as a map.
Don't tell me. A map of time.
Bingo! That's their time wave zero theory. They interpreted those hexagrams as representing waves of time, nesting within larger and larger cycles, kind of like ripples on a pond expanding outwards.
And they created a whole mathematical model to explain this.
They did, and their model showed that these waves of time seemed to be speeding up, heading towards a single point.
Wait, are we about to talk about 2012? Because I'm pretty sure the world didn't end.
Yeah, a lot of people fixate on that date, and you're right, 2012 came and went. Even the McKennas said that date was just speculation.
So maybe we shouldn't get caught up on the specifics.
Exactly. What's really fascinating is the concept of the omega point itself.
Okay, so what is the omega point then?
They saw it as a singularity, not necessarily a single moment, but maybe an era of supercharged change, of transformation, maybe even a merging of individual consciousness with something much larger.
Okay, now that's a mind-blowing concept. Are we talking about some kind of evolutionary jump for humanity?
You could say that, yeah. They thought consciousness is always evolving, and that time itself is a key part of that.
So time isn't just a passive thing, it's an active force, shaping consciousness, pushing it towards this omega point.
That's the idea, and it really challenges us to rethink who we are and what our place is in the grand scheme of things. If consciousness is evolving and time has a direction, it suggests a purpose to the universe, right?
That's a big idea. And in modern science, purpose isn't something we talk about much.
You're right, it's a radical notion. But the McKennas, they never shied away from the big questions, did they?
No, they definitely didn't. Whether you agree with their theories or not, you have to admire their boldness. They weren't afraid to ask the really big, difficult questions that most people avoid.
Absolutely. And that's what makes the invisible landscape such a fascinating and thought-provoking book. It's not just about theories, it's an invitation to think differently, to question what we think we know about reality.
It reminds us that the more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know.
It's true.
And that's okay. Actually, it's more than okay. It's exciting. It's that sense of mystery that keeps us asking questions, searching for answers.
Totally. Keeps us exploring.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe the McKennas were onto something with their ideas about time and the omega point.
Only time will tell.
Yeah, it really makes you think about time differently. It's not a straight line, more like a spiral or a fractal with those repeating patterns.
Great way to visualize it. And for the McKennas, this cyclical time, it wasn't just theoretical. It led them to that very specific, and let's face it, controversial prediction about the future, the omega point.
Right, the omega point. We
Yeah.
can't avoid it,
No,
right?
okay.
They linked it to 2012, and well, here we are. So did they just get it wrong?
It's easy to dismiss the whole thing based on a single date, but I think that misses the point. They were working with a model based on interpreting ancient texts and patterns. It's not like they had some perfect vision of the future.
So maybe we shouldn't focus too much on the when.
Exactly. That's really interesting, the concept of the omega point itself. They imagined it as this point of singularity, not necessarily a moment in time, but more like a period of crazy acceleration, transformation of consciousness, maybe even a merging of individual consciousness into something universal.
Okay, now that is a mind-blowing idea.
Yeah.
So are we talking about, like, an evolutionary leap for humanity?
You could put it that way. The McKennas, they believed that consciousness is always evolving, and time is a vital part of that evolution.
So time isn't just this neutral background. It's an active force shaping consciousness, pushing it towards the omega point.
That's how they saw it. And it makes you rethink our place in everything. If consciousness is evolving and time has a direction, does that suggest a purpose to the universe? That's a big idea.
It really is. We don't often talk about purpose in science, at least not in those terms.
It's a bold concept, for sure. But that was McKenna's, always pushing the boundaries, asking the big, uncomfortable questions.
They definitely got us thinking. The Invisible Landscape, it's a challenging book, but it really makes you question everything.
It's a wild ride, that's for sure, but in the best way possible.
It definitely is. This whole deep dive, it's been a journey, to say the least. We've covered shamanism, holographic brains, the mysteries of DNA. We even touched on quantum mechanics and ancient Chinese wisdom.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. But that's what we love to do here on the Deep Dive, right? Push those boundaries, explore those big questions, and who knows, maybe the McKennas were onto something.
I think they'd love to hear us having this conversation.
I think so too. So, to our listeners, if you're feeling a little intellectually stressed right now, that's a good sign. That means your mind is expanding. And if you're ready to dive even deeper, I can't recommend The Invisible Landscape enough. Just be prepared to have your mind blown wide open. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you in the next Deep Dive.